Hey there, www.andrewmarkmusic.com. This is the third one in my spiritual gnosis series. I want to preface this by saying I identify as a modern Christian Gnostic, although I often reference the Vedas in the Eastern tradition. But I am no way claiming to be a guru or a spiritual teacher in the sense of what the Vedas espouse on that issue. I've made it clear that I classify myself as what the Christian Gnostics traditionally classified as a psychic. Now, this should not be misinterpreted in the modern generic sense of psychic. That's not what it means. There is Hylic psychic and pneumatic, and that's how I classify myself. And I wouldn't, if I died right now or tomorrow, I wouldn't even get into the Pleroma under that category. I would end up in what they call the eighth or the ninth. So I think it's important that I put that out there, just, to be clear on what I'm saying here. However, this has been a 50-year, I'm 65, and I really started this search about 50 years ago into, what all this is, the nature of reality. So if I'd spent 50 years being a banker, I think I would be qualified to speak on banking. And because I spent 50 years researching spirituality, I think I'm qualified to speak on it. So this one is about, is the material universe real? And I think nobody knows. That's where I'm at with it. Does it seem real? It certainly seems real. Do I, if I was to throw the dice on a bet, I would go it's real. But, it's really tough to say. The thing is that everything a human can think about the material world is all mediated by the mind. So everything is a representation created by the mind. This is traditionally known as idealism. But there are different schools of idealism, and there are different schools in the East who tackle this question. And I forget the name of one of the schools, but it's a middle ground school where it's non-dual, but it does teach also that this material realm is actually real and not an illusion. So in modern philosophy, it's called objective idealism. If we're going to say that our minds and consciousness is the primary avenue of knowing anything, then that would fall into objective idealism, as opposed to physicalism, where reality is reduced to atoms and all the subatomic particles. There's a lot of problems with physicalism and materialism. The obvious, the first off, now I know this is easily refuted, but it's still worth mentioning as just a basic point, is that how physicalists and materialists are refuting idealism, but they're refuting it with idealism, with the mind. They're using their consciousness to refute consciousness. Now, in my last video on free will, I tend to be more on their side if you want to get nuanced about it. because I tend to lean. I'm very heavily influenced by the Samkhya school, and that the manas, the bidis, and the amkara are instantiations within Prakriti, the material universe, and this ends up being dual aspect monism in modern consciousness studies. And that means that the material universe is real, and that it's two sides of the same phenomenon, different aspects of the same phenomenon. So, there's things, I called it epiphenomenon in the last video. So this is where I'm coming from. It's not a hostility towards materialism. Like, I get it, because I sit. If we're if we're defining words with to frame a context, then the manas, the bidis, and amakara are a part of the material universe. So that creates an argument for these lower minds to be epiphenomenon, and that's a basic materialist point of view on consciousness. So again, the point I'm trying to make here is I'm not biased against materialism because, say, I was raised in religion, which I wasn't. This was an adult quest for me that started when, I was like really about 16, 17, but really 19 is when I really got into this inquiry. So I do tend to think that the material universe is real and not illusion. Now, there's different theories that I think, I'm fond of. I lean towards the idea of the holographic universe. I think for me, it's a plausible explanation for this, but I couldn't be sure. And of course, there's modern simulation theory, which I get. But again, that's the people who promote it in a dogmatic way are just, it's overstepping, it's overreach. I get the appeal of it, which would mean that this place isn't real. It's simulated, and again, the holographic universe tends to point to the same thing, so that would make it not real. But again, if I'm forced to swing the bat here and go which one of the two, I would go holographic. And then, as a last resort, if we're gonna, parse this out and consider things, then the last one would be simulation as a potential explanation for this. I think one of the things that is a bit of a tangent here is the idea of a soul, which I've come to reject. In my view, if there's something going on with reincarnation, which is more than rebirth, the Buddhist rebirth, which doesn't have a soul, a personal soul involved in that rebirth, then one of the things I've suggested is that we might be dealing with advanced memory technology that the archons are able to manipulate. So a child comes back here and they think they have a very clear memory of their past life, but that could have been downloaded by the archons. So in which case, And I also said this in my last post that the AI endeavor under Samkhya and Prakriti could likely be fulfilled to a certain extent. And this is the same thinking about what I'm saying about a possible explanation for reincarnation is this advanced, and we're talking very advanced, memory technology that's downloadable. So the archons have a record of everything you've done, and they can download that. And this hypothesis, this theory, sort of bypasses the traditional notion of an eternal soul, which I'm very skeptical of that. Again, this goes to my dual aspect monism. The best way I can frame this is to think about 1 square inch of your brain, and just as a thought experiment, that 1 square inch contains everything you could possibly know about the game of Scrabble. But then they surgically remove that 1 square inch of your brain, and you all of a sudden know nothing about Scrabble and never will, unless that brain was repaired. And this is why I've adopted dual aspect monism, because I think this is what all the evidence is pointing towards is this interconnectedness between the brain and the lower mind within Samkhya, as is posited there. So yes, potentially, to sum up here, potentially the material universe is real. That consciousness is a epiphenomenon. What I should reframe that and say, the lower mind, which is not consciousness in the way we think of it in the West, is epiphenomenon. The true consciousness, defined by how we use the term generically in the West, would be Purusha, Satchitananda. But this is not embedded in the way that we would think, in the same way dual aspect monism is with lower mind. This is a superimposition. It's on top, above, and it's not instantiated within it in the way materialism would suggest. It's a super consciousness. It's a supernal consciousness called Purusha, and this is God consciousness. Now, have I experienced it? Yes, briefly, a number of times. Do I abide in it? No. So I've been meditating, quite consistently for 20 years. So as a novice, I'm quite comfortable speaking on it. But I get my knowledge from many different sources, and I just want to touch on this too. This idea of Christian gnosis. I mean, gnosis just means knowledge. It's all it means. Jnana in the Vedas, every tradition has a word for knowledge, and what's going on here is, especially within the Roman Catholic Church, the Church Fathers framing this, it was just a pejorative. I mean, when they make an assertion about the Trinity, say the Roman Catholic Trinity, that's just spiritual gnosis. That's all that is. So it's no different than what anybody asserts about spirituality. They're asserting a form of spiritual gnosis. What happened with this particular issue, though, is that they wanted to protect the name of Yahweh and the character of Yahweh. So they blackwashed the Christians who believed, like I do, that Yahweh isn't the Father of Christ. And to do that, they played this nasty game of blackwashing the Christian Gnostics. But that's what it was. I mean, any any sect of Christianity that makes a spiritual assertion about God is making a Gnostic assertion. And then it just comes down to, well, who's got the right gnosis, right? But the way that this has been framed historically is frankly just bullshit. It's deceptive. It's lying. They're lying. They're being manipulative intentionally, right? So it's evil to do that. It's evil to manipulate civilization intentionally for a preconceived end, right? It's dishonest. So I hope that clears up some of the issues surrounding gnosis. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. As far as I'm concerned, the material universe is real, with the caveat that, I have hypothesis B and hypothesis C, which would be the holographic universe and simulation. So anyway, that's the end of number 3 here on Spiritual Gnosis. AndrewMarkmusic.com.